Good morning. Happy Tuesday. I have Neuro Coffee in hand and it is perfect. All right. A very busy Tuesday coming up. We're going to dig straight into today's Q&A with Jason. Jason works with the young athletes. In our conversation, we talked specifically about one athlete, a 13-year-old prepubescent male, and he's showing some strategies that would be associated with a lot of internal rotation, high force production. Apparently this kid's actually a very good athlete. And then the question mark is like, okay, how much of this do we want to allow him to demonstrate? One of the things we want to consider on any athlete is they're typically demonstrating a solution to a problem. So they're trying to solve some movement problem, either in competition or something that we would prescribe during training. And so then they're going to provide whatever solution that they can produce. The question mark is it always acceptable? And we have to make that decision. We have to make a qualitative decision as a coach as to how much of this that we want to see as a representation, knowing what it means, and then how much protection do we need to provide. If we look at this this group of athletes, they're typically in the train to train phase. If we could break this up into three sections, we would say that early on, it's all about learning to train, then train to train. So we're exposing to many broad capabilities and slowly evolving that. And that is in preparation for the training to compete phase, where they have a much more mature physiology. So we're in the setup phase here. So it is kind of important that we approach this from the appropriate perspective. That's not about maximization. It is more about a demonstration of capabilities and, like I said, a broader scope of exposure. So Jason's doing a great job with this. I actually said this during the call. It's like you kind of already knew the answer before you asked me the question, but I think that our discussion is going to help a lot of people that do work with this age group. So thank you, Jason. Very useful call. If you'd like to participate in a 15-minute consultation, please go to askbillhartman@gmail.com, askbillhartman@gmail.com. Put 15-minute consultation in the subject line. We'll arrange that at our mutual convenience. Everybody have an outstanding Tuesday, and I'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Clock has started. Jason, what is your question, young man?
My question is sort of an open-ended question. So I work with a lot of middle school athletes, and one in particular, which I've been working with for over a year now. Some things have kind of caught my attention. When I watch them train, when I watch them move, I see a lot of compression strategies across the structure. So a lot of internal rotation, pronation at the feet and the hips and the knees and the lumbar spine, et cetera. So it doesn't worry me at all. He's a pretty athletic little kid, but he's small for his age. He hasn't hit puberty or anything like that. So, and we just do very basic strength training, pushes, pulls, and obviously a lot of like jumping and med ball throwing and sprinting, and everything that a kid's going to need for athletic development at that age. But my question comes in is when I see a lot of these strategies taking place, I just wonder how much his structure is adapting to do that at that young of an age, and like how important is giving him the opposite end of the spectrum, like variability from an expansion standpoint, because there's no hormones in that body to produce muscle yet, or at least not enough, and increase force production and things like that we use strength training for. So I wonder if over the long term I could be having some negative effects over time. I'm not saying that like doing the strength training is bad, right? But everything has a cost. So I just wonder how, going about training middle schoolers in that sense, like what does training the opposite end of the spectrum look like? And is it even necessary?
Okay. So what you're observing first and foremost is a solution to a problem. Right. So you have asked him to do certain things. Sure. He has a certain structure. He has certain physiology. And then he is providing you with, this is how I do it.
Yep.
Right. And that is always going to be the case, regardless of who we're talking about. So if we're talking about a Major League Baseball pitcher, whether we're talking about an 8-year-old, whether we're talking about 13-year-old.
Right.
And all we're doing is observing a solution. And then we are making a determination as to what is good and what is not good.
Right.
Based on what we think is best under the circumstances. So you have already asked a question and you go, I'm seeing this. And then now I'm curious as to, it's like, is this really a good thing? Right. And so what we want to make sure that we're doing, number one, is we never want to hurt anybody, obviously, right? And so again, so he's doing certain things to produce force, and again, within his capabilities. When we talk about physiology, like the physiological progression of an individual, and then we associate it with the training process. One of the best ways to look at this is where is this kid in that process. And so if you break it up into sections, you could say learning to train is step one, right? They literally need to learn how to, right? And then there's the phase where they're just training to train. So now we're starting to try to influence physiology a little bit more. We're trying to take advantage of some of the what would be referred to as a sensitive period, right? So there's certain periods where certain aspects of physiology are going to accelerate certain processes. So speed is very important early on in that process, whereas maximal strength comes a lot later. Right. And so now we have to look, and we have to say, okay, where is this kid in this process? It's like, what are we doing? So I would look at this from the perspective as he's 13. How many scholarship offers does he have so far?
0.
Okay. How many professional contracts is he about ready to sign?
0.
Okay, so he's kind of far away from like the end game of his ultimate capabilities, right?
Sure.
So at this point, what our primary goal is making sure that you are setting him up for, say, 3 years from now. So when he's 15, 16, 17, where the loading parameters are really going to be influenced by his physiology. So at this point, what I would say is we want to try to expand his capabilities to whatever it is he is capable of doing. So there are limits.
Sure.
His physical structure is a limitation, whatever it may be at that point in time. Right. So, you're seeing some of these IR strategies. They're just force producing strategies, right? No matter, like, again, whether we're looking at a 45-year-old accountant that is, has an arch that looks like it rests on the ground, or a kid that's pushing into the ground, they're doing the same thing. They're pushing into the ground. So he is trying to come up with a force-based solution under the circumstance for what you have asked him to do. Sure. And so then it's your job, if you want to see the other end of the spectrum, we say, well, what is his capability at the other end? Now you have to select an activity that challenges him to access that.
Okay.
Right. So it would be the difference between like a series of jumps where that he's got a time constraint, he's got high force production necessities and such. And then you say, but let's go over and just do a bear crawl. Totally different other end of the spectrum kind of a thing, right? Where he has to physically change the shape of his body to whatever it is within his capabilities. Where I can expose him to the demands of the other end of this so-called spectrum of force production or movement capability, right? And so then that becomes your assessment in regards to, well, what does he have at the other end? How far can he go in this direction? And then if you know this, so let's just say that his physical structure is not one that's going to be the type of person that is going to be demonstrating these high-end, mobility capabilities, right? Let's just say that he's going to be biased towards these compensatory strategies to produce force. And again, not a bad thing. Athletes do it all the time. Okay. But now you're going to say, I might need to do a lot more of this stuff that moves him away from what he is the best at. Because if I allow his superpower to take over now, I'm going to give up all of what protects him. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so he's in this train to train kind of phase. Right?
Yeah, I'd say he's learned. He's learned, I guess, from our standpoint of what we do.
Yeah. So again, it's like, you're not pushing him to max capabilities. You're trying to expose him to a variety of things, right? Yeah. And now, but you're starting to see what he is starting to be capable of, because he's going to hit puberty pretty soon, right?
Yeah.
And then you're going to go through another big change.
Yeah.
Right. And so like I said, the setup becomes very, very important, that like he has an understanding of meaning in regards to what is expected of him, what you're trying to achieve. He's probably still a little bit more malleable in this age range than he will be 3 years from now, where his physiology will start to sort of solidify towards his adult representation, right? And so I think it's advantageous at this point is to start to include things that you think are really, really far away from what he's demonstrating. So if he's like showing like these IR strategies, high force type strategies, it's like, let's see what happens when I do put him in a situation where expansion would be the desired outcome, where we're getting more external rotation. That like the posterior expansion that we always talk about is where we get that extra rotation to superimpose the IR on. It's like, can I put him in these other situations to where now he has this broader range of capabilities. He has the spaces to protect himself where he's going to superimpose the high force on.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes total sense. And you used the word malleable, and that's what I'm looking at, his bones like bending. I mean, obviously not like a ton. And I'm like, I imagine the muscles operate like you've used the term like as squeezers before, right. Like, and right. I imagine the muscles are still doing that even though there's not a ton of muscle. And he's like,
it's not about mass. It's about the coordinative effects, right?
Yeah.
So again, for anybody to produce force, we got to push down into the ground pretty hard, right? And so he's going to do it whatever way he can. And again, as his physiology changes, he's going to get bigger. He's going to naturally get stronger under most circumstances. That's how kids, grow.
Right.
And you want to start with whatever it is that you think is best. If you see this really strong bias towards one direction, it's like, maybe he turns out to be like the world's greatest athlete in some respect because of that.
Because of it. Yeah. I don't want to mess with it, but I'm looking up, my eyes are like, yeah. Wait a second. Like, cause he's also a baseball player too. And I keep trying to tell him, like, this particular kid, I'm like, hey, go play another sport. And he's like, I don't want to.
Yeah. Well, but you are the other sport. See, that's the thing, dude. It's like, that's one of the things. And I think it was Ty Terrell that sort of made this point when he was working for us. And he, I want to give him credit for it because I thought it was just a brilliant statement. He's like, we don't worry about the kids playing the other sport. If they want to do that, that's great. We encourage that. But if they're not going to, we're the other sport. So it's our job to sort of give them the other things that sport would naturally take away if we think that there's value in the maintenance of those capabilities. And I think in most cases, for a 13-year-old athlete, I think that it would behoove us to make sure that we build in buffers against what they are already demonstrating to be their sort of like their superpowers. As I say, it's like there's certain things that stand out in certain kids, and it's just like, man, it's like we want to hang on to that. It's going to be something good and useful, but if we give it too much now, we're going to take away something that might protect them later on.
Yeah, that's really the heart of my question there too, because I also have another kid that's kind of like, I guess you could say on the other end of the spectrum. Like, say if they were, like, an example would be if they're doing like a reaching to cone single leg deadlift, single leg RDL, and I see one kid is like, it's like his pelvis wants to like roll backwards, like he's gonna do like at the bottom of a squat or something like that. Yeah. And then this other kid, it's like, hello, arch back. And I'm thinking like, both kids run about the same, fly 10 time. They're both 8th graders. They both play similar sports. And I'm like, that's really interesting. Just to kind of see those two structures.
Well, and again, it's like a structural bias is going to provide different strategies. If we looked at the extremes of the archetypes, and let's just say that you have you mentioned 8th graders, so we're going to use 8th graders. So you have an 8th grader that is definitely structured towards a wide bias, and you have another that is the slender, narrow ISA.
He's skinny. He looks like
it's like they may, people say, well, could both those kids have the same vertical jump? Absolutely. Could both those kids have the same flying 10? Absolutely. It's like how they get there, however, because their starting points are different, how they're going to get there is going to be a different strategy entirely. And then like I said before, it's like the question mark then for you, and this is where you get to be the good coach. You get to say, I want you to be able to move in that direction that quickly, but I'm just going to give you enough of this other stuff to make sure that it, it doesn't affect you later on. Right. It would be great if everybody could play 3 different sports and was good at 3 different sports, but I don't think it really works that way.
Yeah.
I think the kids gravitate towards what they love because they're kids.
Right.
And they also find out maybe they're really good at something.
Yeah. And they want to stick with it. Yeah.
And again, we don't necessarily want to take that away. So then it becomes our responsibility, like I said, to be the other sport. And I think, you asked the question and I think you already kind of knew the answer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You just need the objectivity that is difficult to produce when you're in this situation. And you're probably doing already a whole bunch of good stuff, as far as, building the buffers in. You're doing a variety of activities, I'm sure. But I think that from the 10,000 foot view, you always got to step back and you go, how much of this do I want to allow? And then how much of this do I need to protect him from?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's process. It's always process, Jason. You don't make any huge mistakes, right? Always gradual change, always gradual introductions, like the smallest amount of change to produce an outcome. That would be the last piece of advice that I would give you on this. It's like, just don't make these big giant leaps, because he'll change all by himself. Right. And then you will be making adjustments on the fly anyway. But like I said, I think you already know what the answer was.
I appreciate that. And yeah, that's kind of the end of my email question said was, I kind of had the feeling that this is the direction that I needed to go. And like, you used the bear crawl example. We do bear crawl examples, and I'm like, hey, don't shoot your head towards the floor. Try to get something there. But I also look at it and think very basic, breathing, posterior expansion for the ribs, or doing a respiratory squat. Those are really hard things to teach with 10 middle schoolers in one room. Of
course they are.
And so I'm
that's why this is not an easy job, my friend.
No. And I'm going back and forth in my head, and I'm thinking, if I obviously step 1 on the, progression or regression scale would be hey, I could be wrong by saying this too. Let's, get in supine or quadruped and learn how to breathe. Right. And I'm like, well, if I skip that process, am I doing them a disservice? But if I try to do that, it's going to turn into a logistical nightmare with, 10 middle schoolers. But
understood. But like I said, it is difficult, but like I said, I think you're on point. Hey, I need to run to the next call.
No worries at all. I appreciate it.
Hope it was helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.